Warehouse 13, Human Target, Jericho. Our next guest, Steven Scaia, wrote on all three shows and is currently writing the feature film adaptation of Tom Clancy's Ghost Recon, the video game for New Regency. Steven's going to talk about Beverly Hills Cop 4.
I'm Steven Scaia, and today we're talking about my dream of a Beverly Hills Cop sequel. Ever since I was a kid, I've been in love with Beverly Hills Cop. My friends and I, we always sort of talk about a lot of these types of movies, like if you could remake anything, what would it be? I feel like the time is right for Eddie Murphy to come back and do a great action-packed, hard R version of that movie. To me, the thing I miss most is R-rated Eddie Murphy. Action comedy Eddie Murphy is so much more fun to watch than PG Eddie Murphy because he is having such a good time in such a serious situation, and I miss that. I miss Eddie Murphy Raw. Eddie Murphy Raw is so much better than Eddie Murphy The Clumps. It's so much funnier than him putting on makeup. What is the great Beverly Hills Cop movie that no one's making? And I know they're making one, and I hope this is the way they're going with it. So the way you start the movie is you start the movie with Paul Reiser's character, Jeffrey, in Detroit. He's murdered. They make a phone call, and of course, you reach Axel Foley, who's now living the sweet life in Beverly Hills. He is the Beverly Hills Cop who gets on a plane, flies to Detroit, and the whole movie takes place in Detroit. The whole twist on the movie is he is the fish out of water once again. It's been 30 years since he's been back to Detroit, and now he's the one who doesn't fit in the town that he grew up in. He or she is someone who really loves where they come from, and when Axel Foley gets back to Detroit, he is looking around being like, this place is a fucking dump. What did you people do with my city? You clearly don't know how to handle this. And the person he is with is saying, my place is great. It's got some problems, but it's really great here. I understand that this is not the city I grew up in, but it's still home for me, for Axel Foley. And the other person saying, I can clean up these streets and I can make this place safe. Any version of a complex bad guy today has to tap somehow into the frustration we have with everyone has to a level with politics and politicians, business, and the way business as corporations seems to take advantage of the individuals. And I think that there's a great way to tie that into someone trying to keep big business surviving in Detroit to the detriment of the people of it and living off of them and the cops that they've bought off to protect the thing that they shouldn't be doing that they're doing inside of Detroit. But it's basically like shitty business people that are completely relatable, but not in the 80s way where it was, we're gonna get rich. It's in the now sort of modern way where it's not even about business itself succeeding, it's about the corporation mattering more than the individual. The institution of the police force is gonna try to matter more than the individual cops, and that's what Axel Foley is gonna teach the young cop, which is, no, I never played by their rules, and that's the thing you gotta learn. The way to be the best cop is to not work within the system. It is to do what you believe is right and trust that the system will correct around you, which isn't necessarily the best way to be inside the police department, but it's a way to be a great cop. The young cop should have family ties to Detroit because Axel Foley would never have left if he felt more rooted in it. And I think that that's something that the person should say, basically like, listen, you didn't care enough to stay, you left. And you can actually have a strangely interesting character arc for Axel Foley where he basically comes home and he realizes, oh right, this is the place I really care about and I want to be here. We all start to Stockholm a little bit about LA. We only see the great things about it and we stop seeing the things that we don't notice until we go back home and visit our family and they say, LA's made you soft for this reason, for this reason, for this reason. My buddies and I, we joke about how great it would be to find the next Eddie Murphy, who's the wisecracking young detective on the force, where Eddie Murphy has to show up and gets ridiculed by this young guy who's like, what do you know about being a cop in Detroit? You're a Beverly Hills Cop. It's the mismatched pairing of these two guys. They don't get along at first because, well, he sees a lot of himself in this kid, and so much time is gone that he has to sort of relearn how to be Axel Foley, where he's not asking for frappuccinos when he goes to drink coffee. He's not looking for a juice bar because Axel Foley now has become the thing he thought was so funny. He's the guy who does yoga every day. I think Axel Foley's still the same person he was 30 years ago, but I think like everybody who moves to LA from someplace else, it changes you. Everyone jokes about how your blood thins. You start to take on a more liberal attitude towards everything and you loosen up and you know, you hang out down at the beach more than you used to. I grew up in a place that didn't have a beach, not far from Detroit, and now I don't know what to do with myself when the temperature drops below 50 because it's freezing cold, and I don't know how do people like live like this. And to me, I think that you can only live in the casino that is LA for so long before you also stop to notice the passage of time, because there's no real seasons, there's no weather. I think Axel Foley thinks he's been here a year and a half, and he realizes, oh shit, I've been living in LA for 25 years now, this is crazy. And the reality check is going back to Detroit and someone saying, you know, you're not bad anymore, you used to be bad. And he's like, no, I'm still bad. And it's him proving it not just to the young kid who doesn't believe him, but to himself, that he's still got what it takes, because in Beverly Hills, there's not a lot of crime. So while he's still got the goods as a detective, he's not getting to put it into practice like he would be in Detroit. On the adventure of solving Jeffrey's murder, you discover that the cops in Detroit, some are crooked. It's him and this young Axel Foley are the only ones that can solve the problem. The pinch point of Act 1 into Act 2 would be where they realize, even though they don't get along, they have a common enemy, which is the people that killed Jeffrey. They can't trust anybody else because the cops seem crooked. Things devolve for them as they sort of make their way through the underworld of Detroit. Act 1 is all about him realizing that any street cred he had when he left Detroit, he has used up, and so he gets no respect from anybody in Detroit, especially the young, hotshot, streetwise detective who is basically a young Axel Foley. Axel Foley doesn't have a son or a daughter. Axel Foley has a young cop that he has to teach how to be Axel Foley. It's always hard for me to imagine my heroes settling down. I don't imagine Indiana Jones having a family. I don't imagine James Bond, you know, hanging it all up one day. To me, what I love about those iconic characters is they're timeless. And so Axel Foley, to me, is never a guy who was striving to reach the goal of having a family. He was a guy who just wanted to be awesome at what he did. I see a version where maybe he did get married, or he's been married 4 times. But I think when we catch up with him in the story, he's not anymore. And maybe he's got a little something to prove to himself. Because the thing that makes Axel Foley great is his stubbornness. And that's what makes him interesting as a character, but also would probably infuriate anybody that tried to share a life with him. I bet he doesn't think of his life as lonely. I think he thinks his life is great. No one messes with his stuff. He's got his buddies that he hangs out with on the weekend. He's got a decent life. And then I think when he goes back to Detroit, maybe spending some time with that young cop encourages him to kind of grow a little bit more as a person. To me, how I always liked that Die Hard is John McClane's story that's about him beating the bad guys, but it's just as much of him realizing things he was doing wrong in his relationship with Holly, and how he had to be more open, and the things that he thought that made him a good provider didn't necessarily make him a good husband. I think there's a version of Axel Foley that he's a charming guy, and he's good at what he does, and he is the kind of guy that will walk right up to you and tell you what you're doing wrong, and then offer you the solution to fix it. And there's a lot of guys like that in LA, and specifically Hollywood. So to me, it doesn't ring untrue that the life he's living now, too, is the fairly empty life of a professional. He was doing his job as a cop one day, walked through a film set, saw a movie star, told him what he was doing is wrong. He's got so much charm and charisma that movie star is like, you're my new technical consultant. And he's been living the life of kind of like Jack Vincennes in LA Confidential, where he's stopped being a cop and has started becoming a personality that comments on copping. And while he's still got a Beverly Hills badge, he maybe is a little bit out of touch with what being a real cop is like. And when he can go to Detroit, everyone can say, oh, that's right, you're that Beverly Hills cop. You're the guy you're the tech advisor for that terrible show. That's his way of saying, listen, no one respects you as a cop anymore, and he gets to show everybody he's still got what it takes to be a great cop. I think there's a version of his life where he's got some friends that are celebrities, and then Rosewood, I imagine, is still around in Beverly Hills. Taggart is probably retired and living in Big Bear and fishing all the time, and they see him every once in a while. But I don't feel like Axel Foley is a guy who has a lot of friends, and it's not because he's unfriendly, it's because he chooses his friends very wisely, and they mean a lot to him. So when his buddy dies in the first movie, it lands on him, and then in this one, when Jeffrey dies, who's an old friend of his, it means a lot to him too, and so he feels like he owes it to one of his few old friends to go solve that crime. And so through the course of the movie, in Act 1, they don't get along. Axel Foley finds he has no mojo. I think the thing to me that Axel Foley is gonna be able to teach the young detective and sort of get his mojo back, not just for himself, but out externally to the people of Detroit, is that he is a guy that doesn't care about the system. He's a guy that cares about the crime and solving it. If the police department's pushing back on the young detective saying, don't follow this case, back off, get away from it, you'll ruin your career. The kid's like, listen, they told us to back away, like, this is gonna ruin my career. And Axel Foley's like, who the fuck cares? Like, we gotta solve the crime. And the kid is still concerned enough with working within the system that he has to learn from Axel Foley, you gotta work outside the system. And he proves that to be true by, I'm imagining like there's gotta be some really incredible Act 1 to Act 2 break, action scene, car chase through the streets of Detroit where this kid who thinks this old man who showed up with a badge, with a Beverly Hills badge, he learns this guy's basically a superhuman cop. And that's where, driving through the streets of Detroit, Axel Foley knows the streets better than that kid ever did. He's able to show him how the job is done and then gets respect out of that kid when he's like, I don't know how you did that. And Axel Foley's like, it's called police work. Right now, I feel like a lot of people feel like they are not heard. And I think that when someone like Axel Foley comes in and brings you the wish fulfillment of, let me tell you how to be heard, he teaches you that, but then you can also teach Axel Foley, listen, there's a way to do things within the system. And it's just that cop system is his family, it is his friends, it is not the police department, it isn't the city of Detroit. What makes Detroit great is not the car business, it is that we are a connected family of people who care about each other. Act 2 is all about the two of them teaming up and realizing the enemy isn't each other, it's someone inside the Detroit police force. They come to the begrudging respect for each other. End of Act 2, at the low point of the story, all seems lost. Eddie Murphy says, listen, I know where the bad guys are and I know how I can end all this. I gotta make a phone call. I need a couple friends. The car rolls up, it's Taggart, it's Rosewood. Rosewood's got the trunk of guns. You know, the young Beverly Hills cop's like, who are these two old guys? And Taggart schools the kid on, we're original badass cops. And the four of them, like in the original movie, they lay siege to some place. Awesome action shootout, everyone survives, they're heroes. Young Axel Foley now has a newfound respect for old-time Axel Foley, for original Axel Foley. In Act 3, when you team up with Taggart and Rosewood, who can tell you the story of Axel Foley and why this guy is awesome, the young cop has a newfound respect. Eddie Murphy kind of gets his street cred back and realizes he may have gone soft, and this young detective learns there's more than just making cracks about the banana in the tailpipe and being a good, smart cop. I think the thing that makes this really relevant now is that the 80s were all about excess, and now there's no excess left. You have two characters, the one who's living the life of excess from the 80s, coming back now to the reality that the young cop is living in, where it's not about excess, it's about heart, and the two of them can teach each other a little something. You could teach Axel Foley that it's okay to have a family and it's okay to settle down, and you can teach the young cop that even though you live in Detroit and things are tough, it doesn't have to be hard and there's still blue sky. And I think that's a big part of what this movie is, because what makes Beverly Hills Cop as a franchise great is not just the palm trees and the martinis that the bad guys are sipping, it is the fact that it's fun and there's a lot of blue sky, and I think you have to find that blue sky in Detroit. It should have a little bit of the odd couple-ness to it, where Axel Foley comes into Detroit and he's bringing all the blue sky of Beverly Hills with him. And so the young cop who's there should be charismatic, but should be harder and tougher and not as fun until that character learns how to be fun from Axel Foley. Because Axel Foley's the guy he's the guy who kills you with kindness and he catches you with honey, and he's all about the carrot, and this young cop is all about the stick. Having fun makes you a better cop. I believe that because it lets you be creative with problem solving. And this cop is not a by-the-book cop, but this cop is hard and angry and taking revenge out on people for messing with the city. Axel Foley comes in and says, you know, instead of kicking that door down, you could knock on that door and tell that guy a story, and that guy's gonna walk you right in. You don't have to fight that first guy. You don't have to fight that second guy or that third guy. You can get right to the fourth guy that you want to. You could tell him exactly what you're gonna do, watch his reaction, know if he's guilty or not. You've saved yourself 20 minutes, a lot of fighting, and getting shot at. You know, he doesn't have to be a wisecracking African-American kid. He should be indicative of whatever the thing is in Detroit. Like, I know there's a huge population of Muslims, and like, that's interesting to me too. It should be someone where he is still a fish out of water. It can be a black guy, but it could be a black guy who's like, you don't get me, man. Like, I am not what you think. I'm a whole different type of thing than you think I am, And that's interesting too. It's so little about choosing the proper ethnicity, but it's about finding the right person that matches the level of charm and chemistry with Eddie Murphy. And so I think it's like, there's 10 different versions of who that person could be, including a woman, by the way, and that could be great. It just has to be someone who speaks to the disenfranchised streets of whatever Detroit is now, like the city that used to be. That's the most interesting choice. I mean, you find someone who kind of grew up in a place that has a really unique point of view because of where they were from, and you apply that to Detroit, and someone who has a great comedic voice, but also someone you can believe is convincing with a gun. For example, Andy Samberg is hilarious, but I think part of what makes Brooklyn Nine-Nine so funny is that I don't believe for a second that he could take anybody down or shoot a bad guy. But there was always something about Eddie Murphy where in the moment when it got real, I believed him as a cop, and I believed that he was tough, and I believed that even though he wasn't the strongest, he was the guy that was gonna win the day no matter what. His experience is gonna be different because he grew up in a place that was the Motor City, and he saw decline, whereas this person grew up in the decline. And so they were already someone who was very far behind. The rest of the country was already making fun of Detroit when a 20-year-old something is coming of age. They're gonna have a lot less wide-eyed charm, but they're also gonna be a lot harder, and they're gonna be a lot better at surviving, personifying that in a cop who says, even though the town is falling apart, we've lost our main sources of industry and commerce, and the cops are crooked, I am still gonna be the Detroit that I want. I'm not gonna be the Detroit that is, I'm gonna create the version of it that I want.
What if Tarantino made a Batman movie? They don't just exist in some writer's head. They're a little too out there. If you'd like me to keep making more, please share this with all your friends. I hope you enjoy them.